This is July 4th, 2016, and we're looking at the JPL entrance. There are hundreds of people inside waiting for Juno to enter into orbit around Jupiter. What we see here is all of the satellites that JPL division of Caltech has flown and are flying now. The one we're looking at today is this one. Jupiter mission Juno, headed around Jupiter. We're here at JPL by invitation as media. And we can see the public is also invited behind us, and they will be coming in a moment.
I'm Stuart Stevens. I'm a mission planner on Juno at JPL.
And you've been with it longer than 5 years, you say?
For about 10 years, yes.
So it took 5 years to plan it and then launch it.
And then 5 years to get there, and so we're looking forward to getting there on July 4th coming up.
And it's performed its maneuvers, correction maneuvers, so you feel you're right on target.
We feel that we are, yes.
Okay, and so July 4th at between 7 and 10, you'll know.
Just around 9 o'clock in the evening is about when we'll know that we're in orbit.
Uh-huh.
Forward to that.
Uh-huh, and that's going to last a number of orbits, 37 orbits or so, and
Right, we'll be there for a year and a half until early 2018.
uh-huh, and you're primarily looking for the formation of the planet.
That's right. The origin of the solar system by looking at Jupiter and its interior and how it was formed and evolved over time.
And we're going to get great photos.
We're looking forward to some great photos as well, yes.
And video clips and stuff.
Not at the time of orbit insertion, but sometime afterwards.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, break a leg, as they say, you know, before you go on.
Thanks.
Really hope everything goes off well. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a replica of the titanium box on the full-scale model that contains all the wiring and special stuff that they're trying to protect from the intense radiation of Jupiter. They expect that as Juno gets closer to the planet, that the radiation will increase. Here's a scale model of Jupiter on display at JPL. And over here is the famous red spot. I believe first pointed out by Cassini, 1600 something. But Galileo was the one that put a telescope to it and saw the 4 moons that circulate around Jupiter and started a furor because it began the process of saying that the stars and planets did not circulate or revolve around the Earth, but rather were in orbit around the sun. And of course, that was heresy to some who thought that it diminished the role of God in the universe. And we're here with a replica or a scale model of the Juno spacecraft. That
right behind me.
Yes.
The 1/4 scale model. We got so many models that it's hard to keep them straight, but this is the 1/4 scale model.
Yes. Yes. And on July 4th, today's July 1st. On July 4th, you plan to actually put this spacecraft, the original, in orbit around Jupiter.
That's right. It's the spacecraft is already into its orbit insertion sequence. That's already been triggered, and we got confirmation from the spacecraft that we're in the sequence. So right now, this thing is just executing its pre-programmed commands. Of course, it's so far away. One-way light travel time is 48 minutes.
Okay.
So there's no intervention that we can take. The spacecraft is playing its own game right now, and when it's all done, and when it comes back on Earth with the high gain antenna and back on Sun to recharge the batteries, it will tell us how well things went during this critical maneuver.
But this is not the first time you've sent spacecrafts out to Jupiter. I think in the 70s you started. However, if I read my press kit, this is the first one that uses renewable energy all the way. Is that correct?
That's right. The previous spacecraft that I've been familiar with, Voyagers 1 and 2, for example, Galileo, Ulysses, they all use what's called a radioisotope thermal generator. It's a gizmo that converts heat from radioactive decay of plutonium to electricity by a thermocouple. So that's one way to carry your own power source with you. Of course, solar arrays, everybody's got them on their roof now. They've made great strides in the efficiency of the solar arrays. It turned out that was a better engineering solution for us to use these solar arrays, massive solar arrays. These are huge. Each one of these solar arrays is about the size, surface area of a bowling lane. They generate, at Earth, they generate around 12 or 15,000 watts. That's enough to power a house. By the time we're 5 AU, 5 times the distance to the Earth away from the sun, we're down to about 4% of the solar intensity, and they generate about 500 watts. And that's enough to power the instruments in the spacecraft, and we're quite happy to have it.
And now tell me about the engine there in the back. You're electronic, so it's not a fan blowing air. So what actually is coming out of the engine to slow it down?
Well, it's a biprop propulsion system. So it's a rocket engine, a very efficient rocket engine. The spacecraft that we launched to Jupiter weighs about 8,000 pounds, a little more than that. Much of that is propellant. By the time we're done with this burn and the period reduction burn, the spacecraft will be about 3,500 pounds.
Okay.
And that's comparable to a BMW 3 Series in terms of its weight. You know, it's interesting, when we launched, the launch mass, the rocket that put this up into the heavens, that was 1.25 million pounds. So by the time we're done, we're putting less than 0.25% of the mass that we raised off the Earth into orbit about Jupiter. This is a mock-up of the radiation vault. It's about a meter on a side, about a yard on a side, it's a cube, and it's made of almost a 1/2 inch thick solid titanium. And the whole point of that is to attenuate the hazardous radiation that we're going to experience in orbit about Jupiter. It attenuates that radiation by a factor of about 1,000. But even still, after almost 2 years in orbit, radiation probably will be the end of the spacecraft. It's the most severe radiation environment we've ever attempted to operate in space. We've designed the instruments and the payload and the electronics in such a way to withstand the maximum amount of radiation, but eventually the radiation will get the better of us.
And so what's the radiation actually doing to the wiring? Is it diminishing it or burning it up? Or
Not the wiring so much, but the radiation messes with the semiconductor electronics.
I see.
It's the penetration of these basically tiny bullets into the silicon of the electronic transistors and components. So eventually they can, they can withstand so much of that, but eventually they get too much, and they cease to function within the parameter requirements of the part.
Sure, so it won't work. Now these are the louvers that you were talking about,
Right.
and this is to let heat out.
That's right. So all this electronics, of course, that these solar arrays are powering, they're consuming a couple of 100 watts. And, you know, in space there's no air,
Yeah.
so you can't convectively cool something. It has to radiatively cool.
Right.
Radiation goes like the fourth power of the temperature. So the thing is trying to cool radiatively, and the box warms up, the electronics inside warms up. So these louvers open a window into the cold of space, and the heat can radiate out through that window. So they're totally self-contained. There's no electronics that opens or closes these windows. They open and close by themselves depending on the temperature that they sense.
Inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Now, has a box like this been used before?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so this is a pioneering effort.
Nobody's had to shield, you know, their sensitive components as heavily as we've had to shield these, because
Sure.
nobody's gone into this demanding of a radiation environment before. Now, shielding, of course, is a common concept, even for Earth orbiting spacecraft.
Yeah.
But they tend to be individual part shields, small shields. But we determined that this solution was a good engineering solution for us. Because we collect all of the sensitive stuff together and we can shield that entire environment. And then by collecting all of the subsystems and components together, some of them can shield their nearest neighbors. So
Yeah.
we're putting all the mass where it'll do the most good.
Well, you'll learn a lot, and I'm sure. And how about cameras? Now, we use cameras in my business all the time, and I bet you got some good ones.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't go without a camera. So we do have what we call a Juno cam. It's primarily an education public outreach tool. Because we're going to a unique vantage point over the poles, and so we'll get really fabulous wide-angle images of this unexplored polar region. But it's not a full-blown science investigation in that sense. It doesn't have a big mirror, a big camera lens like some of the other missions we've flown, because imaging was not the focus of this mission. And we are on a spinning spacecraft designed for other kinds of measurements. And that would make imaging rather challenging.
But there will be some.
There will be some images, and the great part about it is these images get uploaded essentially the instant they come in, and they'll be made available on our website to the public, and amateur astronomers the world over can grab these images, can mosaic them together to make full images of Jupiter, and do the color registration that they need to do with these separate filters. And we exercised that during Earth flyby, and it worked great. We had images we'd post when they came in the evening, and by the next day, some of the amateurs were posting back fully composed images. It was fabulous.
That was when Juno went around Earth to get a slingshot boost out to Jupiter. Yeah, that's really a cool concept.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, yep. Now, I have a question about the cost. Are you the right person to talk about costs or no?
Well, I know the cost, and I can tell you the cost. It's public information.
Yes.
This is a New Frontier mission, which means it's a PI class mission, and it is cost capped at a specific amount. We have to manage the mission to do it at that cost. And this mission cost $1.1 billion.
Okay. Over the whole life, which
Over
meant
the lifetime of the
preparation
mission,
and then actual shooting, and now we're...
From design through launch, through orbit insertion, through what we call Phase E, the entire science investigation, and even some period of time after the mission flight is over, where we're wrapping up the data and some of the science.
I see. I see.
So it's a bargain at twice the price.
How many people work on it, more or less, over all that time and the life of it?
That's a tough number, but we're estimating about 900 people have worked on it for at least part of their time.
Sure.
So I'm part-time, all the scientists are part-time, all
Sure.
the engineers largely shared amongst different projects.
Sure.
But understanding that only a portion of somebody's time, there are about 900 people have been involved.
900 people. Jack, I'm looking at the solar arrays here, and being from the desert, the Mojave Desert, we've seen a number of solar fields by B&H Renewables and SunPower and Iberdrola Manzana. All of these are household words for us, and I'm curious about the efficiency of these solar cells and who makes them.
So these are gallium arsenide cells. I think they call them triple junction cells. They're very efficient. The manufacturer makes up a large lot of them, and then they're selected so that they match the characteristics of the cells that are going to share the same circuits.
Sure.
And they're the very highest efficiency ones of the ones that they produce. I think it's about 28% efficiency. Yeah, we work directly with the solar panel manufacturer because as a magnetometer guy, we have to make sure that the circuits don't generate any magnetic field.
No,
so we work with them to design a circuit that would be self-canceling. And so I've been to actually all of the major solar manufacturers in the country for various projects.
Yeah.
And as I recall, I think these were made, fabricated at Spectral Lab here in California. And I think that's correct. We've worked with other manufacturers, of course,
Sure.
in other places, but I believe these are the Spectral Lab.
So like somewhat like the tiles on the space shuttle, each one has been looked at and calculated and tested. And
you know, you can pretty much assume that everything we put into space has been individually characterized and tested and selected very carefully to make sure that it's going to perform the way we expect it to.
Sure, sure. Well, Jack, thank you very much for your hospitality, and of course, best of luck on Monday.
Thank you.
And give me your title on the project. I didn't get that.
Okay, I'm the deputy principal investigator. The principal investigator, PI, as we call him, is Scott Bolton at Southwest Research Institute. So I'm the deputy principal investigator. I'm at Goddard Space Flight Center. Been there for many years.
I see. And where did you go to college to prepare for this career?
I went to Cornell up in Ithaca, New York.
Sure.
Undergraduate and grad school.
Well, thanks very much for the informative tour.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And let's give people an idea of how big it is. I've been told that it would fit into an NBA basketball.
Well, yes, in one dimension it's much bigger. It's not quite rim to rim, but it is massive. You can get a sense of the scale right there. It's a beautiful vehicle, isn't it?
It is. And we talked a little bit about that. The design of a spinning spacecraft. It spins because it reduces the need for energy, and it's an old design, a relatively old design, a mature design.
Yeah, there's not that many spinning spacecraft out there, but it gives us a lot of stability. It simplifies our operations, and we have a plethora, 8 science instruments on board. And just on the body of the spacecraft alone, we have 18 different sensors looking out to the side. And so the spinning spacecraft helps share all the viewing time. So all the instruments get equal observation time with Jupiter and space.
And that's another thing, the fact that this spacecraft always faces the sun. So it's a polar orbit, but it never stops looking at the sun, except in a case like this when we have to turn away to burn our engine.
That's right. If you're the sun, and this is Jupiter, the spacecraft comes in over the top. And all of its orbits are in this plane, so we never go into Jupiter's shadow. Pretty important requirement for a solar-powered spacecraft.
Right. So we are getting close to the burn. We're partway through. Bring us up to speed. What's happening with the spacecraft right now? We've got some imagery of the burn. What's taking place? Bring us up to speed.
Well, the main engine burn is 35 minutes, and it'll slow us down just enough to go from a super long orbit. We would just fly by Jupiter without this burn, which of course we don't want. After 35 minutes, we'll be in a 53-day orbit. And when the burn completes at 8:53 p.m., we'll immediately start to spin down to 2 RPM and turn back to sun. That'll happen by about 9:30 p.m., and that's obviously really critical for a solar-powered mission.
So right now it's on battery power because it has to turn away from the sun. So you want to get back to the sun as soon as you can.
Yeah, this is the only time in the mission where getting to the sun is second priority. The first priority right now is getting into orbit. And it'll keep firing the main engine until we're successful. And right now it looks like the main engine is just doing great.
You mentioned something at the news conference earlier today. You said this is not the first time you've fired that engine. This is the third time.
Yeah, it's a very well-designed mission. We fired the main engine twice, very successfully, back in 2012. And we know how to fire the main engine. It worked perfectly twice, but what's new here is we've never done it in Jupiter's environment. And the first peak of radiation that we expected to see is already past us.
What's
and
the
the next
second?
one, it's after the main engine.
Okay.
So it's looking really good, but this is exactly how we designed the spacecraft and the sequence to operate.
And that's how it always is with missions. You prepare as much as you possibly can, but there's always that uncertainty when you get there.
That's right. We worry and we fret and we test and we go over it again and again and again. And this is probably one of the most thoroughly tested sequences. We started way back in 2011 before we launched. We thought about every conceivable scenario. But nevertheless, we're really glad to see the main engine burn going so well.
But you just don't know what Jupiter is going to throw you.
It's a really crazy place to go.
Yeah.
Someone who's outside the business would say, "Are you nuts? Why are you going into the most hazardous places, especially this deep into the radiation belts?" But you know, we spent 5 years before launch thinking about exactly how to make the spacecraft ready to handle that intense environment.
All right, so you'll be holding your breath one more time at the end of the burn?
Yes.
Right.
We'll certainly be paying attention.
You and me both. All right. Thank you so much. Rick Nybakken, he is the project manager for the Juno project. And you're watching live coverage of Juno's arrival at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And right now, we are going back to the MSA and rejoining Stuart for an update.
Hi, Gayle.
Hi, Stuart.
Hey, Gayle. Everything's going really well so far as we can tell. The tones that signaled the start of the burn weren't seen right away, but we did in fact record them, and we verified that we received them at our other DSN complex. So we verified with the tones that we started to burn. More than that, though, we also verified with something called Doppler, the change in the frequency of the radio signal that we're still getting. It's just the regular carrier signal that doesn't have information encoded.
I interviewed that kid too.
You can tell that that signal changed at the moment of the start of the burn and changed in its slope in such a way that the change in velocity was recorded, and we could tell that we're starting to record that change in velocity as we're now slowing ourselves down as we go into Jupiter's orbit in that 35-minute burn. So we're monitoring the Doppler. We also saw the Doppler changes for the turn and for the spin up, and we'll see more Doppler changes a little later that accompany the tones and telling us something about what's going on in the spacecraft. Everything looks great so far. We're a little less than halfway through the entire 35-minute burn.
And Zeus, of course, was the king of the gods, and she was the queen of the gods, Juno. She was married and cared a lot about children and marriage and keeping everybody well behaved and sort of like a good mother would. And Zeus was sort of being naughty with some friends and doing things, and he saw Juno looking down at him or starting to come close to him, so he cast a veil of clouds around himself and his friends and tried to hide his naughtiness. But of course, Juno was a fairly powerful god herself, and she saw enough that she said, okay, I'm suspicious, and kind of traveled down and used her powers to look right through the clouds and see the true nature of Jupiter and understand what he was really up to. And that's exactly what the Juno spacecraft does for us, is that it goes there with special instruments in a special orbit and uses its magical powers to see right through Jupiter's clouds and understand its true nature, which is holding these secrets for us about how the solar system formed and where we all came from.
Scott Bolton, the PI from the Southwest Research Institute, joins us now. This has been your baby. How does it feel to be seeing us go through the burn like this?
It's incredibly exciting. It's going well. The rocket's burning. We're slowing down and getting into orbit around Jupiter. It's so great that I'm feeling.
Now, what are you watching out for as we go through this burn? Are there key moments that you're watching?
So there's a couple milestones that I think are really critical. One of them is the burn, the 20-minute mark on the burn, which we're coming up to really quick.
We're at 39 minutes past the hour.
We're at it, basically.
We're at it.
And so that's a critical point, because although we're not in the orbit that we really desire, we've probably burned enough that we're captured by Jupiter.
It's interesting. We heard the team clapping just a little while ago. So they were clapping at the fact that we are technically, may not be the orbit that you were hoping for just yet, but we are already in orbit around Jupiter.
Right. Even if the engine stopped right now, I think we would just be in a very large orbit.
Okay.
So we've made the transition from being in orbit around the sun to being in orbit around Jupiter. At least that's the theoretical predictions. But it's right around that 20-minute mark, so we should have just crossed that. Every minute now is icing on the cake. We're getting again. Right now we're running batteries, right? We can't get any power because the solar rays are not pointing at the sun. We've got to point that back to the sun so that the juices start flowing through Juno's veins again. That's what gives you the electricity for the rest of the mission.
So for a solar-powered spacecraft, that's your lifeline.
That's it. That's the critical time. You've got to get back on the sun. So we're not out of everything, all the risk, but the majority of the risk we've already accomplished.
Earlier today, the team released a movie, the approach video, and we can run it and show people what you see as Juno comes in. It was taken up to 5 days ago, correct? Because you had to turn off your instruments. But here it is. What do you see when you see that?
So what you're seeing actually is the first time that humans in any time in history have actually been able to see the motion of the heavenly bodies. I mean, this is how nature works. We've never actually been able to see it. This is what Galileo realized.
That was what Galileo saw in the 1600s.
Absolutely. He pointed the first telescope up at the planet. He was clever enough to realize that over a few nights, those stars near Jupiter seemed to change position. And he realized, oh my gosh, that means they're going around Jupiter. And of course that changed our culture forever, because all of a sudden you had, Earth wasn't the center. Here's something else that's got things going around it. That was a very profound moment for our culture. It changed us, our perspective on even ourselves and how we fit into nature. And now, 500 years later almost, we're able to actually see the motion ourselves. This is the first time. We haven't even got a movie of any planet and moon together. And so it's great that Juno was coming in at this angle and had the right kind of camera to capture this motion.
You've described that picture like it was a mini solar system. Is Jupiter kind of like that?
Absolutely. That shows you Jupiter is really a mini solar system. It has a few moons. Those are the Galilean moons. Mm-hmm. Those are the brightest. You're seeing them go around at different periods. That's natural harmony. And if we back off of our whole solar system, that must be what we would look like. Now, of course, if you did back off and you saw the sun, the easiest planets would be Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Earth and its neighbors would be really tiny dots, but that's the way we must look. And if you back off of that, our sun is going around the galaxy. I mean, so the harmony is there in nature at every scale. Even if I go down to the atom.
Okay. It has a special significance to you and also the team. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. That camera is truly an outreach camera. It was designed to be able to get the first picture of Jupiter's poles. And as we fly over, we'll capture that.
Yes.
You can see that in this video right here. That is Juno Cam right there. And Juno Cam is an outreach camera in the sense that you can go onto our website and you can, the raw data will be loaded up there for the public and schools to actually process themselves, create these images. And they can do more than that. They can actually go on the websites and help vote where we point the camera. So if they've got a special or favorite feature on Jupiter, like the Great Red Spot or some other little storm, they can vote, demonstrate why they think it's important. The public gets a chance to share in that vote, and whoever gets the most votes, that's where we're going to point the camera. And we'll have that up and running a little bit later in the mission. As we go into our prime mission, the public's going to get a chance to join our team, actually get the images, and help decide where the camera points.
And what sort of response have you received from schools, from teachers, from students?
Oh, incredible response. We were just getting started, and a lot of the amateur astronomy Canadians jumped on board. Whole schools have jumped on board. We threw out a little experiment as we flew by the Earth a few years ago, and we didn't even have the website up yet, but we put the data out on the web, and while we were sleeping, in the middle of the night, we woke up and all these images of the Earth were already made for us. So it's great to see, citizen science. The public is joining our team, and we need them.
And so they will have access to the actual raw data and be able to do what they will? Will they be able to work with the imagery themselves?
They will. I mean, what we will load on is a little bit less than just raw, because that's a little difficult to deal with, but they will be basically each filter somewhat raw, arranged, and they can mix the colors the way they wish. They can bring out different features by dialing these things up.
And doing what scientists do themselves.
They can process them. They could make a little movie, with taking that sequence.
Just like we just saw. All right. And not only that, we have Juno Cam, but I'm told that you also have some hitchhikers on board this spacecraft. Can you talk about that?
I often get asked, do you have any passengers on board? And we do, but they're Lego minifigures. And we have Galileo on the left side. In the middle is Juno, the goddess. And on the right side is Jupiter with his lightning bolt.
And what are they made of?
They're actually made out of spacecraft-grade aluminum. And they're inside of our spacecraft. They're getting the ride of their life right now. And they've got the best view of any of us.
And why did they decide to have these extra passengers, so to speak?
So it was part of an outreach education program. Lego's a very education-minded company, and I wanted to reach out and help children work both creatively and analytically. And of course, when you're building Legos, you're doing both the mathematics and you're creating something new. And so we reached out to the company, and NASA embraced that and created a little bit of a collaboration. And we ended up suggesting that if they wanted to fly some figures, they could do that. We helped, kind of jointly design them. They made them themselves. Of course, I gave them the specs and what kind of metals to use and what to do. And then NASA tested them just to make sure everything was okay. And then we mounted them on the spacecraft, and off they went into space.
All right. Well, we are just a few minutes away from the end of the burn, but what's going through your head? What are you most anxious about, and what are you looking most forward to as part of the science team?
Well, now I'm a little more relaxed than I was before the burn started, but so I'm really looking forward to the science at this point. I'm starting to realize, okay, we're going into orbit. This is going to get started. It's fantastic, and I'm just so curious about the discoveries that we can make, and learning about our beginnings, and what can Jupiter tell us about how the solar system was made.
And managing expectations, because this was such a critical moment, we turned off all the science instruments right now. When can we expect some science coming back?
A couple days from now, we'll turn the instruments back on. But our first orbit is 53 days long. And so we come back to Jupiter with all our eyes and ears open the next time. But that's not till the end of August. But we will have spectacular discoveries on it.
All right, well, I know you want to get back in there, so thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
Good
having
luck
me.
to you, and we'll be all holding our breath. All right, take care, Scott. So it's about 48 minutes past the hour here at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We are getting very close to the end of the 35-minute burn. Let's hand it over now to our mission commentators, Stuart Stevens and Tracy Drain in the control rooms at JPL and Lockheed Martin.
Hi, Gayle. We're happy to be almost through our burn. You can tell from the Doppler that we're looking at that everything is going smoothly. We're continuing to burn and change our velocity. We've got about 5 minutes or less now at this point before we complete the burn. We heard some minor celebration earlier. You'll hear more when we complete the burn because we burned long enough, roughly 20 minutes or so that we are now in orbit around Jupiter. It's just not quite the right one we want to be in. As we burn more and more, we'll get closer to the right orbit period of 53.5 days that we want to be in. Now it's a much larger period if we were to stop the burn at this moment. So both the tones, we aren't getting any tones right now, but we will get one at the end. And the Doppler are telling us that everything's working on schedule, and we're just holding our breaths for another 4 minutes or so. We're here on Lockheed Martin with Tracy.
Yep, and you can kind of see if you look behind us at the MSA, the team here at Lockheed Martin, people are standing on their feet. You can feel the anticipation building. It's pretty great that we've been able to see, as Stuart mentioned, that the Doppler is going pretty smoothly. And so the tension level isn't exactly higher because we feel from as much information as we have in hand that things should be going well. We should be captured. But we're all eagerly awaiting the tone that'll tell us that the burn has indeed cut off on Delta V and we're in the exact orbit that we want to be in. So we're all waiting for that to happen.
All right, we are about 30 seconds away from the minimum burn, which was 52 minutes after the hour. And I see a display here, and the estimated orbit at this point is about 62 days, and it keeps counting down. The longer we burn, the shorter the orbital period at this point. At this stage of the burn, it's about 61 days. So we're just counting down.
All stations on Juno Court, it's time we see the tone for minimum burn timer. Almost there. Juno, welcome to Jupiter.